Welcome to Staple or Stinker. We don't do this very often, but we have Joshua Schmidt in the house. And if you might watch the video that is showing right here, last time you came here, you had the best record in this game ever.
Really?
Because in Staple or Stinker, we show people magic cards, and they have to guess whether they're a staple of the game. They were played in various formats. People generally know their name, and when they hear the name, they think, wow, that's a good card. Or a stinker, meaning people thought it was good, but then it ended up to be kind of bad.
Mm-hmm.
And I will show you 5 cards. And last time you had 4 and 5, until in the video that you're seeing right here, our Yu-Gi-Oh show host, Taylor, had 5 on 5.
Also, it's not the best score anymore.
Give me the crown.
No, I wanted to keep it.
You only get it back if you tie with Taylor.
Okay.
You get a 5 on 5.
All right, I'll try my best.
There are 5 cards here, and they are all famous for either being great magic cards or for being terrible. So first card, I will ask you to tell me it's a staple or a stinker. It's called Fervor.
Fervor, all right. So that is a red card, costs, what, 3 mana? Enchantment, what does that mean?
In Yu-Gi-Oh, this would be called a field spell. So you pay the 3 mana, and it just stays there. There's things that can remove it, but not a lot of stuff removes enchantments, so it just usually chills.
Creatures you control have haste.
Most of the creatures, they enter, and unless they have the word haste on them, they can't attack or even tap to activate their abilities.
Yeah.
So this is 3 mana to give all your creatures that ability.
Okay, so you're playing Yu-Gi-Oh basically.
Yes, 3 mana to play Yu-Gi-Oh! That's a low cost. We're just looking at 1v1. So in a game of 1v1, is this card a staple or a stinker?
I feel like it's a tough one because I could easily see this card being, like, as you said, hyped and then not delivering, because 3 mana I feel like is very expensive for a magic card. It's always hard for me to grasp the impact of the mana cost on the effect of the card, because the effect is obviously good, right? Being able to, once you play this for the rest of the game, attack with all the creatures, like immediately, essentially, that seems very powerful. You see, the way I'm looking at it is it could also just be like a combo tool, where like there's a deck where there's a creature that does something really crazy when it gets to attack, but usually because they can't attack immediately, all of your opponents will, they will see you play the card, they will know, oh, if this attacks me next turn, that's gonna be really dangerous. I'm rambling a lot because basically what I'm trying to hide is that I'm having a hard time on whether this card could be terrible or it could be good. If there was a creature that had a really powerful effect when it attacks, would this even be the best way to make that work?
So creatures in Magic don't usually win by attacking. Well, technically they all do, up to 20 damage.
Yes.
But the creatures that end the game don't usually do so in the attack phase. Magic has trap cards. They're not called trap cards. They're counter spells. And either playing a creature with a counter spell backup, or cards that are free counter spells like Force of Will, Force of Negation, will be another way to play a creature and protect it.
Okay, in that case, I don't see this card being good in aggro because I think 3 mana is too much for an aggro deck to make use of this. And if there's better ways to protect creatures that you want to attack, then it's also not good in other decks. So, stinker.
Fervor is a stinker, and it's a classic trap to new players who see it and they're like, what, 3 mana and everything in play then attacks? But you know what's better than the next turn your creature's attacking? Playing a creature on turn 3 and then it attacking on the next turn, usually for damage. If you draw 2 of these, this is terrible because it's redundant and you want a high quantity of creatures. It doesn't win tournaments. So you are 1 point up, 1 on 4. Let's see, let's put this crown a little closer to you. Is the advantage crown, the advantage bar? Let's look at card number 2. Give this one a read.
Arboreal Grazer, which is just 1 green mana. It's a creature that has reach, which I think I recall that means it can block flyers. When Arboreal Grazer enters the battlefield, you may put a land card from your hand onto the battlefield tapped. I think I'm gonna have to talk about this card way less than the previous one because this card I think is very good.
Okay. Could you walk through your process?
Well, because I'm thinking like 1-drops in card games that have mana involved, I think are usually quite good. And if this card like lets you get additional lands onto the board early, so you're basically 1 mana up every turn on your opponent after you've played this, plus you get a 0/3 body that can block and prevent some damage later, and even block, I don't know how relevant having reach is, but like a 1-drop with a body that can block that gets you ahead on the mana curve, I would think is pretty good. So I'm gonna say this one's good.
So you would say this is a staple?
Yes.
I brought this buzzer with me.
Okay.
And we're gonna press it every time you're wrong.
Okay. Are we pressing it?
No. Great
Nice.
job.
Thank you.
This is an absolute staple. And it's funny because it fooled everyone.
It did?
Because in Magic you have a lot of 1 mana cards that tap for a mana.
Okay.
Like Llanowar Elves, Elvish Mystic, and everything. And those are good because you can play decks that have a low land count and then count these as extra lands that are also creatures. And people looked at this and are like, what if I have a hand with just 1 mana? This will never tap for 2 mana on the next turn. This is not good. It's a trap because you'll think that's a land, but you need to have the lands in your hand. Until they realize that most of the time you'll have at least 2 lands. And it also cheats. You can put any land.
Okay.
Which is super relevant. It's not just tapping for 1 mana. It's putting utility lands, lands that tap for more mana, lands that have abilities where normally if you play them, but now they enter the battlefield. This is a staple. You're currently 2-0. Well done. Have a look at the next card, please.
Thalia, Guardian of Thraben, 2 mana, white creature. First strike, non-creature spells cost 1 more to cast. So they strike first.
Yeah, exactly. First strike, they strike first. So if she fights a 2-2, she deals a 2 damage, the 2-2 dies and never gets to deal damage.
She doesn't get the return attack. Okay, yeah. That's, I feel like, a nice bonus to have. I think the relevant part of this card is the fact that if you're playing a deck with a lot of creatures and your opponent is playing a deck with a lot of non-creature spells, everything that's not a creature will be more expensive.
Yes.
Which means that if you're playing, I don't know, I would imagine this being in like an aggressive deck that plays a lot of creatures and just wants to play efficient creatures early and attack the opponent. And if then the opponent is gonna have a harder time to counter those creatures because they can't cast removal spells or whatever.
I see the Yu-Gi-Oh player knows about symmetrical effects not being always symmetrical.
The funny thing is that symmetrical effects are usually the least symmetrical effects in the games because then you just build your deck so that it doesn't affect you and only affects your opponent. Yeah, we would call this a floodgate in Yu-Gi-Oh. I don't know if you have the same term for cards like that.
Never heard of it.
Yeah, we call cards that stop your opponent from doing something and just stick around for like permanent and very annoying. We call those floodgates, and we tend to hate them a lot. And I think this is one of those cards, and I think it's very good because it's one of those cards.
You are absolutely correct. This is a staple.
Yeah.
As you said, everything you said, 100% correct. You play this in decks with a lot of creatures because this only affects your opponent. Your opponent has removal that costs 1 mana, now it costs 2. If they want to get rid of this with their 2 mana removal spell, they have to wait a turn. This is a very, very powerful magic card. Every time it's in standard, it's always played. This is played in all the Eternal formats as well. Well done. Let's go for card number 4. So far, you're catching up with Taylor.
All right. Lurrus of the Dream Den. 3 mana that can either be black or white. It's a legendary creature, and it's a companion. Each permanent card in your starting deck has mana value 2 or less. What is a companion?
So companion is like an extra deck in Yu-Gi-Oh. I think. I don't know enough about extra decks, but you can play this at the side. You just show at the beginning of the game, I've got this card.
Okay.
And you have a contradiction. In this case, every permanent in your deck has to be 2 or less. 2 or 1 mana. You can't have anything that costs 3 or more as a permanent. Okay. But if you do that, if you fulfill that cost, at any time you can pay 3 and put it into your hand.
You pay 3 to add it to your hand?
You pay 3 to draw it.
Okay.
So it's a lot of mana to add a creature and it's a big cost, but you have the consistency of every game you can have it if you pay 3.
So it is kind of like a commander, but
like
in 1v1? Oh, that's tough for me to evaluate.
But you can only do that once.
It's got lifelink, which is...
Whenever it deals damage, you gain that much life.
Okay, yeah. Once during each of your turns, you may cast a permanent spell with mana value 2 or less from your graveyard. That includes creatures.
Yeah, permanence is everything that's not a spell, instant or sorcery.
The concept is cool because you have a card that you will very consistently see every single game. Can companions also go into your regular deck?
Yes, you can play them into your regular deck as well. Without filling it, like if you don't want to fill the cost of being able to bring it back, you can just slot it into your deck.
Okay, so this could just be an issue of this is a terrible companion, but a good enough card to see play normally?
It could.
That doesn't seem bad. Like a 3 mana, 3/2 that once per turn gets to revive a small creature. So there's 2 chances for me. Either it's good as a companion or it's just good in your regular deck. Or it's terrible.
On all accounts.
I don't think it's terrible though. I'm looking at it and a 3 mana creature that revives 2 mana creatures once per turn and has lifelink. Like if you just put that into a normal deck, that just can't be as bad. You can revive that with it.
You could revive that with it, yes.
That is a card I would play in that deck, in a deck with that card.
Some would say it's pretty good.
Yeah, I think I've talked myself into calling this a good card.
It's funny because you stumbled into the right answer for the wrong reasons, but congratulations, this is indeed a staple.
Okay, so what is the actual reason?
So tell me if this would influence your opinion. What if instead of paying 3 to bring this to your hand, you could just play it from your companion zone?
Well, that would make it even more broken then.
They used to have that rule when they released these. These were supposed to be like companions, and they would just kind of float there around and you could play them.
So what you were telling me is that was a way to balance the card, is they added an extra cost
It
to
was still too strong.
Because it's not just super consistent, it's also just a free card. That
you have an 8-card hand. So they had to errata all of the cards to do this instead, where you pay 3, and they're like, solved, it's fixed. No one's ever going to play Lurrus anymore, or the other companions. And still to this day, the fact that you could have this in your side deck, you play out all your fast spells, and then you play this later on once you run out of spells, usually aggro decks, or decks that are really low curves, run out of cards eventually. But now you always had the option to pay 3, bring this back, then play this, and play your 0 mana spells the turn it comes into play.
Does it ever see play just as a card in a deck?
No, because it's banned.
Oh, okay.
Like
but it
almost
would.
everywhere. It would, yeah. It's really good. The card was just too good. The restriction was too low. In formats like Modern or Legacy, the bigger formats, you're not really playing 3-drops anyways, because they cost too much.
All right.
So this was a free incursion in those decks. It's too easy to just add a free card to every deck.
I'm happy I got it right, but I feel like I didn't quite grasp how broken it was, but...
We'll still count it.
Okay.
Okay, on the next guess, you either get this crown, or you get the buzzer. We haven't heard it yet. This might be your opportunity to hear the buzzer. I'll tell you, this is a tough one.
Is it?
Give Tybalt a read.
Tybalt the Fiend-Blooded. Okay, first of all, I don't even know if I guessed the Planeswalker last time. I've heard the word before, but I'm not entirely sure how that mechanic works.
So for context, for everyone like who are Yu-Gi-Oh player watching, or people who haven't been playing with a lot of Planeswalkers, they make a lot less of them recently. In the world of Magic, we're all Planeswalkers. When we play, we're someone who walks through the planes, through the dimensions, and casts spells. You can summon friends. This is a friend. They cost a certain amount of mana, and they sit on the board, and they have a life total, which is their loyalty to you. So this one would start with 2 life.
Okay.
And then they can cast a spell every turn. This one has 3 different spells. Sometimes they have 4, sometimes they have 1.
Okay.
And this one, for example, will either add a life to cast to do the first ability, it'll go up to 3, lose 4 life to do the second ability, you'd have to do the other ones first, and then usually they have an ultimate, which is a big spell that costs them a lot of life, but usually is very strong. And players can attack you or this. They can target spells that deal 3 damage to player to you or to the Planeswalker. It's like a small player next to you that casts spells. Which makes them pretty hard to evaluate.
But you can just, if you attack this with a 2-attack creature, it'll die?
Well, normally not, because you can activate it the first time it comes into play.
So you play it, it'll go to 3, and then, okay. So this is 2 mana. The first ability, which makes it go +1 life, is draw a card, then discard a card at random. The second effect is -4. Tybalt deals damage equal to the number of cards in targeted player's hand to that player. -6, gain control of all creatures until the end of the turn. Untap them, they gain haste. So, okay,
you know about haste.
I know haste. I know how haste works now. So I take all my opponent's stuff and I tap them for game. This is odd because I feel like, I don't know. You say it's tough, but I'm looking at this and I don't feel like it's very good.
So your gut feeling is that it's a stinker?
That is my gut feeling, because I'm thinking like, is there another way to increase the loyalty on these cards other than their own effects?
Technically, but they're not very common.
Okay, so like in order to use one of the powerful effects, I'd have to have this sit on my board for 2, 3, 4 turns at least, and then survive another turn, because if on the turn that I'm going to 6 life on this thing, I can't use the other ability, right?
No, you can only do it once a turn.
Okay, so like it has to survive for 5 turns, in which I've paid 2 mana just for a card to let me draw and then discard at random, which I don't like that. I feel like if it was a targeted discard, if I could filter my hand and improve its quality, that'd be good. The card itself doesn't seem very good to me.
So it's a stinker?
It's a stinker.
Congratulations! You have tied at least, and I would consider defeated because you had tougher cards. Taylor, this card, when it was released, was 30 to 40 bucks. Because people are used to Planeswalkers snowballing and having crazy effects, and they usually cost 4, 5. They had a 3 mana one, it was really broken. This was the first ever 2 mana Planeswalkers. People flipped their bucket. Until they started reading the text and tried to play with it, this card usually reads, pay 2 mana, randomly ruin your game plan a few turns, and then your opponent takes it out. Congratulations, you were 5 on 5. You are now the official Yu-Gi-Oh champion of the Magic channel.
Thank you.
Well done.
So does anyone bring back Thalia with the...
They did before they banned Lurrus. Yes, it's very powerful in the same deck. We teased the audience, so let's. Would you like to tap the buzzer? Oh, that feels good.
That was good.